300 meters underground, a human being is holding a small flame made from animal fat. There is no sunlight down here, no sound from the surface. The walls are cold and damp and pressing in from every side. And this person is painting a lion. Not because they were bored, not because they wanted decoration. 3 days earlier, a lion had killed someone in their group. They had watched it happen. They had carried the body back, and instead of running from the memory, they walked 300 meters into the earth to put it on a wall. That decision is one of the oldest mysteries in human history, and once you understand why they made it, you will never look at your own fear the same way again. Here is what the data actually shows when you look at 40,000 years of cave art from every continent where humans lived. The most dangerous animals are the most painted. The animals that could kill you, that hunted you, that could take a child in the night. Lions, mammoths, cave bears, woolly rhinoceros. These appear on cave walls again and again, across thousands of years, across cultures that had zero contact with each other. Chauvet Cave in southern France is 36,000 years old. 65% of every painting inside it depicts a predator, not prey animals, predators. The deer and horses that actually fed these people, the animals they hunted for survival, they are there. But they are outnumbered. The dangerous animals dominate the walls. Now, some people hear this and think, well, maybe dangerous animals were just more impressive. Maybe they painted lions because lions were exciting, because they were dramatic, because a lion makes a better painting than a rabbit. But here is the problem with that. These artists had access to deer every single day. Deer were everywhere. Deer were the most reliable food source in their environment. If artistic interest drove the choice, deer would appear constantly because deer were constantly present. They chose lions instead. And it is not just Chauvet, Altamira in Spain, Lascaux in France, Cueva de las Manos in Argentina, Murujuga in Australia, cave after cave, continent after continent, separated by tens of thousands of years and thousands of miles. The pattern is identical. The animal most likely to kill you is the animal most likely to end up on the wall. That is not a coincidence, that is a signal. And signals this consistent across this much time and distance always mean one thing. The people making these paintings shared something deeper than culture. They shared a neurological response, and that response was fear. The question is what they were doing with it. Researchers have argued about cave art for over a century. There are three main explanations. Two of them collapse under scrutiny. The first is hunting magic, the idea that ancient humans painted animals to gain power over them, to control the hunt through ritual, paint the mammoth on the wall, and the real mammoth becomes easier to kill. This sounds compelling until you actually look at the paintings. Most of the predators in cave art show no spears, no wounds, no hunting scenes at all. They are simply standing there or running or staring outward from the stone. If the purpose was to magically ensure a successful hunt, you would expect to see the hunt depicted. You would expect spears, death, victory. In the most famous caves, that imagery is largely absent, and many of the most important paintings are in chambers so deep and so difficult to access that they could not have been used as regular ritual spaces. Chauvet's deepest paintings are over 300 meters in. You do not hold a hunting ceremony where only one person can crawl through the passage at a time, and the journey takes the better part of an hour each way. The hunting magic theory does not survive contact with the evidence. The second explanation is simpler. They painted what they saw most often. The most common animals in their environment became the most common animals on the walls. Frequency of encounter drove frequency of depiction, but this fails the basic statistical test. In the ancient European landscape, where most of the famous cave art was created, deer and ibex vastly outnumbered lions and cave bears by a significant margin. If frequency drove painting, prey animals should dominate the walls. Every analysis of those environments makes that prediction. The prediction is wrong. The predators are overrepresented, consistently, dramatically, in every site researchers have examined. So what is the third explanation? They painted what their brains could not let go of. The animals that could kill you are the ones your mind replays, not once, again and again in the dark, when the fire is low and the night is long and there is nothing to do but lie there and think. The lion you saw last week at the edge of the grassland. The bear track you found this morning near the water. The sound you heard outside the shelter that you still cannot identify and are still not sure was the wind. Fear is what the brain cannot release on its own, and painting was how they helped it release. Not trophies, not prayers, processing. The amygdala does not distinguish between a real lion and a vividly imagined one. When the threat response fires, whether you are standing in front of a predator or lying in the dark picturing one, the physiological reaction is nearly identical. Heart rate increases, cortisol floods the system, attention narrows to a single point. The body prepares for something that may or may not be coming. Every resource is redirected toward the threat. For most of human history, that response fired constantly. Every day included genuine mortal risk. The brain was running threat simulations continuously, keeping the dangerous things visible and active, because forgetting a lion's hunting pattern or a bear's territory could get you killed. The replay was not a malfunction, it was a survival mechanism, but a brain locked permanently in high alert threat mode cannot function at full capacity for long. Sleep breaks down. Decision-making deteriorates. The ability to plan, to cooperate, to think beyond the immediate moment all suffer when the threat signal never fully switches off. The constant mental replay of the fear eventually becomes its own kind of danger. A researcher at the University of the Witwatersrand named David Lewis Williams spent decades studying the neurological evidence preserved inside cave art. His work examined the specific types of imagery the human brain produces under altered states and sensory deprivation, and what that tells us about the mental experience of being deep underground in flickering torchlight. What his research pointed toward was something that modern neuroscience has since confirmed from a different direction entirely. The act of externalizing a fear image, making it visible, giving it a physical form outside the mind and outside the body, interrupts the threat loop. The brain can recognize the image as separate. It is over there, on the wall, contained within lines, fixed in place. It is no longer only inside the head, where it can cycle endlessly. The replay slows, the amygdala response begins to settle. This is not ancient speculation. Externalizing intrusive images is a documented clinical intervention for post-traumatic stress right now. Therapists instruct patients to draw the thing they cannot stop seeing, to describe it in writing, to give it shape and edges outside the mind. Because the act of making the fear visible is the first step toward making it something you are looking at rather than something that is running you. The cave painters were doing 36,000 years ago what clinical psychologists prescribe today. The cave was not a gallery, it was a clinic. Here is the assumption almost everyone makes about cave art, that it was created by specialists, shamans, ritual figures set apart from the community, performing sacred acts in sacred spaces that ordinary people did not enter and could not access. The image is specific. A lone figure, probably male, with special knowledge and special authority, moving through the dark to communicate with forces beyond the ordinary world. It is a compelling image. It appears in documentaries, in textbooks, in museum exhibits worldwide. The evidence says it is wrong. Alongside the animals covering the walls of caves across Europe and beyond are hand stencils. A hand pressed flat against the rock, pigment blown around the fingers through a hollow bone, leaving the outline of an absence in the stone. Not a drawing of a hand, the actual shape of a real hand that was once pressed against that specific spot on that specific wall. Dozens of hands in some caves, hundreds in others, thousands in the most extensively decorated sites. Researchers began measuring those hands systematically, finger length ratios, overall hand dimensions, palm width, the same biological markers used in forensic analysis today to estimate age and sex from physical remains. They were not guessing. They were applying measurable, reproducible methodology to a data set that had been sitting on cave walls for 30,000 years. At El Castillo Cave in northern Spain, analysis published in the Journal of Archaeological Science found that at least 75% of the hand stencils belonged to women. Not shamans, not male ritual specialists, women. And alongside the adult female hands, hands too small to belong to adults at all. Children pressed their palms against those same cold walls. Adolescents, the full range of ages present in any living community. This was not a restricted sacred space for initiated specialists. Everyone came into the dark. A mother and her child 30,000 years ago crawled 300 meters underground together and pressed their hands against the stone next to a painting of the animal that had been killing people in their valley. They blew red ochre around their fingers. They left the shape of themselves behind. And what the cave gave all of them was the one thing the surface world could never provide, a place where the thing that was hunting you could be made to hold still, fixed to a wall, contained within a border, under your hands, made by your hands, yours. It held still. For the first time, it held still. Here is the detail that almost every documentary about cave art skips over entirely. The most important paintings are not near the entrances, they are deep. Lascaux' Hall of the Bulls is 150 meters from the entrance. Altamira's Great Ceiling of Bison is far enough in that the outside world disappears completely. Chauvet's most significant chambers are over 300 meters underground, past multiple narrow passages that require crawling. past sections where the ceiling drops low enough to force a person onto their stomach, and shuffle forward on their elbows in total darkness. These artists did not use the first available wall. They passed dozens of suitable surfaces near the entrance and kept going. They went as far in as the cave allowed. Why? In complete darkness, the visual cortex does not go quiet. This is documented. The brain, starved of external visual input, begins generating its own imagery. Geometric patterns at first, grids and spirals and dots that appear regardless of where you look. Then movement at the edges of vision, then shapes that resolve briefly into recognizable forms before dissolving again. Faces, animals, figures in motion. Researchers who have spent extended time in sensory deprivation consistently report the same progression. The brain does not accept darkness passively, it fills it. Now take that brain and add a single small flame. In the flickering light of a fat lamp deep in a cave, with the visual cortex already primed by the walk through darkness to generate its own imagery, painted animals appear to move. The slight shifts of shadow follow the flame's movement. A lion painted on an uneven surface seems to breathe as the light moves across the contours of the stone. A bear's shoulder seems to rise and fall. The walls are alive in a way they simply are not in daylight, in a way they cannot be outside. The darkness was not an inconvenience they painted despite. It was a requirement. On the surface, in daylight, the world demands constant practical attention. There are real predators requiring real responses, real food to find, real decisions to make. There is no space to sit with the thing in your head and look at it carefully. The surface world does not allow that stillness. The cave provided it. The darkness focused the mind inward in exactly the way needed for the fear processing to work. And the flickering light made the painted animal present, genuinely present, in a way that made confronting it real rather than theoretical. You cannot face a fear you cannot see. The cave gave them the dark to see it in. The dark was the tool.